Jacob has been working in the dog industry for going on 11 years. His journey started with learning the ins and outs of positive training at a local PetSmart. That then pushed Jacob to continue down this journey of learning and working with dogs. From there, Jacob moved from California to Missouri to help further his education in the art of dog training. There, Jacob attended and graduated the courses at the Tom Rose School that helped to build a foundation in lots of different avenues in dog training. He had the opportunity to dive in and learn about subjects such as detection work, tracking, search and rescue, basic to advanced obedience, and lastly, protection. Protection quickly became a passion, and Jake dove into the bite sports scene, starting with IGP and then landing in PSA, Protection Sport Association. Jake has competed in PSA both as a decoy and competitor. He has gone on to decoy 4 PSA nationals. Now he strives to achieve titles from both of his Malinois, closing out a level 2 with one and working on getting his level 1 title with another. He also helps his club members do the same as the training director of High Country Working Dogs in Colorado. One of Jake's most recent accomplishments is attending and graduating from the NAPOPO Silver and Gold schools. There he had the opportunity to work with Michael and Bart Bellin to help further understand the science and art that is dog training. Jake currently owns and trains dogs through his company, Synergetic Canine Solutions, where they service the Denver area and beyond. Please welcome Jacob Plascencia. First, thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, Nate, it's great to be here, man. It's great talking to you. Love the channel, dude. Love all the things you're doing. Very enthusiastic, man, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And today we're going to be talking about the 5 most important commands that everybody should be teaching their dogs. Now, with that being said, what would you say is the most important out of the 5? Let's start there.
Of course, yeah, this is a very common one, and the most common request that we get for helping dogs is the come command, coming when called, right? By far, it's the one that is most needed. I do believe it is the most important command because when you're out and about in a busy place, and if your dog somehow slips the leash, gets out of their collar, yanks the leash from your hand, we want to ensure that our dog will come back when called. Too often, distractions are what makes this command one of the hardest because we have competing motivators. We have squirrels, rabbits, other dogs, other people if your dog is social. So come when called, I would say, is most definitely the most requested and the most important command out of all 5.
And so what would be the process for getting to the point of teaching that reliable come when called? Because just like you said, there's all kinds of different motivating factors within the environment that are going to impede on the progress of somebody teaching their dog that reliable come when called. So how do you start it? And then how do you take it to where people want it for that ability to call their dog regardless of what's going on in the environment?
Yeah, so one of the questions that I love to ask owners, I usually start this off in my evaluations by asking this simple question: why does a dog do anything for us? Why do our dogs want to do these 5 commands, or why do our dogs want to do anything? It's a very simple answer, but we sometimes forget because we do sometimes put human characteristics on dogs. But dogs do things because it betters their situation. They find their advantage in doing that because they maybe get something they like, right? So it comes down to motivation. We need to find out what motivates our dog. Using food, using a toy, finding something that your dog loves. Some dogs have very high pack drive. They love to be with you. They love to be pet. Other dogs don't really care for that, and that's okay. Some dogs love playing with toys, whether it's tug or a little game of fetch. Some dogs love food, and maybe it's a specific type of food or treat. But before we get into teaching any of these 5 commands, it's important to understand that our dogs do things because they get something out of it. Sounds a little bit selfish, and I know we don't like to think that our dogs are that way, But when it comes to something like a recall, we have to ensure that they get something maybe better than the squirrel, better than the dog. And so this is something that I do like to start teaching in the house, right? And it simply starts with loading a clicker. Many people are not fans of a clicker, but a clicker is a very distinct sound. You push it, it always makes that same sound. And what I do is when I click it, I give the dog some food. Give it a treat. I may throw the piece of food so it gets to run, chase, grab the treat, and then I may click it again, and then the dog comes back to me. So I start with charging the clicker or loading the clicker with meaning when you hear this sound, come to me and fun things will happen. Either a fun game of play, chase the food, or you get to grab a handful of food from me. So this is a very important part because this clicker will help us in teaching many behaviors in the future. But it's important when we first start to have a marker, because the clicker is just a marker that is charged with dynamite. I want to be able to click the clicker and my dog to come from anywhere in the house. Because if my dog is upstairs and I'm downstairs and I click, and my dog comes running down thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get some food, or I'm going to get to play this game. Then at that moment, we have our recall. We then need to take that and generalize it. With all of these 5 commands, it's important that when we teach them, we start at home in a little bit less of a distracted environment. But we very quickly need to start to generalize that behavior. Because sit inside or come to me inside does not mean the same thing to them outside. Because there's so much other things for them to find out, explore. They can find their advantage in pulling on the leash because they get to go and smell everything that they want to smell. Or they find their advantage in ignoring your come when call command because they get to eat goose poop, right? That's not very cool. We don't want that. That's very bad. And so we need to first start off with charging a marker. Again, I like a clicker because as a human, I also have emotions. And I'm not the best at controlling how I sound. Sometimes I'm over enthusiastic. Sometimes I'm tired, especially if I haven't had coffee. And so the clicker, no matter how I'm feeling, remains the same. Because sometimes I may be like, come. Other times I may be like, come, or good, right? When I change my tone, the dog can definitely sense that. And that's a very important thing to understand, is we're not very consistent with how we communicate with our dog. That's why these 5 commands are important. But to start it off, charging and loading that clicker is key. Because now we have a way to create excitement. It's the why our dogs want to come to us, because fun things will happen when they hear the clicker, when they hear a yes marker. And we need to start off there.
Yeah, it's funny, and you hit on a couple things that I was thinking about with loading the marker. Something I tell people, if you want to use your voice, because I do use my voice most of the time instead of using a clicker, but it is because I don't want to carry around a clicker. And I always tell people there's 2 main reasons why clickers tend to be very successful and very useful tools within our training. One, as you already mentioned beautifully, it always sounds the same. It's incredibly consistent because, of course, our dogs don't have a dictionary. They're not looking up the words that we're using, they just hear a sound. So the click being very distinct and consistent makes it a very useful tool. Then the other thing is, for me, it's much easier to separate 2 physicals than it is to separate a physical and a verbal. Meaning, click reward is much easier timing-wise than yes reward. Because of course, we always want to move at the exact same time. We go yes, and then the dog is not becoming conditioned to the marker. Something I tell people is, contrary to popular belief, our dogs don't do things just to make us happy. Now, granted, we have some of those dogs, like some of those golden retrievers or Labradors, that just want to be around you 24/7, and that's their number one thing. But a lot of different breeds don't necessarily always have that characteristic. So I like to use the term we use in the military, which is whiff 'em. What's in it for me? Now, I do have one question on something that you mentioned when the dog might be upstairs and you click and the dog comes running down. What if the dog was doing a behavior that you didn't like when you clicked on the clicker? So like, let's say he was chewing on the carpet upstairs and you clicked. Now he's coming running down, but he's being rewarded for chewing on the carpet.
That's a very good question, right? And the way I like to think of it, especially if we're talking about a young dog, if you can click and he comes off of the shoe, the carpet, whatever he's chewing, the curtain, we can now call him away from things that may be a little bit higher value than us. So it very much depends on how we look at it. So we may be marking that moment in time that he's chewing on the shoe, but we're also calling him off of the shoe. Whereas what I hear most of the time is I was chasing my dog around with the shoe in his mouth and he wouldn't let it go. Right? That's the exact opposite of what the clicker is doing. The clicker is saying, okay, I would rather drop this shoe and come to you and engage with you. And so it can, and sometimes our timing, we can mark a bad behavior. But if they leave the shoe and come to us, now we have successfully redirected their attention and can plan a strategy to help with the behavior of chewing on shoes. But in what I want you to think of is you're also kind of teaching an out or a drop it command. Because if they drop it, which again is not what's common, typically we have to chase the puppy around and then they're jumping on the couch and around the table and then we're hitting our shin on something and yelling. We now have also a drop it command or an out command. So that clicker, even though the timing of it is marking the moment that they're chewing, is also teaching them to let it go and also teaching them to come back to us. And so if we notice that they do have a tendency to chew on shoes or the carpet, then in our training program, we have to be aware of that and create a plan that will help to provide them with things that they can chew on. And then we can also work on teaching them not to chew on certain things.
Yeah, I always tell people like the marker pinpoints the moment in time when the dog is right or wrong. So if we have the dog loaded to the marker and the dog is, because I tell people like I've seen people with their dog outside running around and then they look outside and they're like, where's my dog? And he's behind a bush digging. They don't see it and they go, oh, well, I'll use my marker. And they go, free. I use free as a terminal marker. And then the dog comes running around and they're like, oh, awesome, it worked. It got the dog to come to me, but they did it while the dog was digging. So now the dog is like, oh, digging is fun, but it also means I'm going to get a treat if I dig. So like double whammy, awesome. I got two things for this one behavior that was a lot of fun, and now they have to work on fixing that. So I always said don't use the markers unless you can see your dog doing the behavior. So I was thinking it might fit well with that. I mean, do you agree with that? Or because I feel like it could cause some issues if you accidentally mark a behavior like chewing or something.
Yeah, I mean, it can, I would say it would more so affect that if the dog has a foundation in shaping, which most dogs don't. Because in shaping, they're figuring out. So if they have a more free brain and then they make that association, I do believe that it eventually can. But like I said, if you can play it in a way to where you set, like the dog's digging and you're essentially calling him off of the digging, right? It's a call off of a decoy, which is very difficult to do. It's a call off from something that they enjoy. And if you can call them off of that, then what we then, then that could be a really good reason to then start to use something like the remote collar, right? Because then the remote collar can very clearly say, okay, the digging is now not okay. But when we talk about positive, if I can call you off of something that, is self-rewarding, is something that you get enjoyment out of, and you will actually come to me, because most of the time they if you click it, they may not even come to you, right? I mean, that's ultimately, they could be saying, come, click, yes. And the dog most likely probably won't, because the digging is more rewarding than coming to the people. But if the dog has a good foundation in free shaping, then you could potentially run the risk of teaching them to dig more. But that could then be a cause of saying, okay, I don't like the digging, I'm gonna click you off of it, and now let's do this other stuff to expend that energy that you have. And then we can say, okay, I need to maybe work more around places that you enjoy digging sand, maybe particular spot at the park, and you take the dog there and you work around that particular environment. But if your dog, like I said, if your dog has very strong and is more of a free thinking dog, right? I have a dog, Diaz, I did a ton of shaping with. He definitely will pick stuff up. If I start clicking it, he's like, oh shit, like I gotta go over here, put my nose in this thing, or I gotta go over here and put my paws on this, or I gotta jump on this. He's a lot more than like Cruz. Cruz, I trained more like the Tom Rose school. It's not as free thinking. He's more of like, I had to do a lot to kind of unlock his brain and let him kind of think for himself, right? And so with that, Cruz is going to have less of an association of like he's marking me for digging, whereas Diaz may have a faster response and like, oh, if I dig, he clicks me. If I dig, he clicks me. But at that moment, then I would click him back to me, and I would redirect his attention with sit down, because it's a self-rewarding behavior, and it comes from a place where there's just an excessive amount of energy that they need to release. And so teaching some of these commands, teaching commands that will help to expend that energy in a more productive way is what how I kind of foresee it. So yes, you may be marking that moment, but you have to think, if I can click my dog off of a decoy, fucking hey, you know, that is pretty damn good. It's not easy doing that. And so no matter if it's like, come, if they come off of a decoy, if they sit out like on the entry to a decoy, that is impressive, because the biggest reward is that decoy, right? And so if you could call, like I view it in that sense, right, where like some of these behaviors, digging and all this stuff, is chewing, and then we have to, it's a little bit different because we have to then come up with a plan if we notice that it's excessive. If they're constantly chewing on the shoe, okay, maybe we then have shoes around and play games. Click, come get the food. Click, come get the food.
That's a really good point. And the free shaping is something that I talk about a lot on my channel to help create that proactive dog. And a big thing that you said, which stood out, is of course, making sure that when the dog comes to you, it's this really awesome, exciting thing, to where when the dog is, in a sense, being told to come, it's exciting because it predicts something that the dog really enjoys. What are some techniques that you've used as far as maybe making the come when called a little bit more valuable than some of the other commands that don't have as much safety involved with the command's success?
I use a lot of unpredictable rewards. Varying the rewards is what helps our dogs to never know if they're gonna get a ball, if they're gonna get one piece of kibble or 20 pieces of kibble, or just get a bunch of loving from you. By varying what we give our dogs, they never really know what to expect, right? And this is a little bit different because a lot of times, and how I've trained in the past, is I have very specific markers that will cue my dog, this is what you're getting. And so I almost want my dog to not really know what they're gonna get, how much they're gonna get. I want it to be a surprise. I want it to be unpredictable, right? When we talk about dopamine, it's very important to understand that when our dog receives the reward, dopamine starts to drop. They've already got it. They're already satiated. They've just been satisfied. Too many times as trainers or owners, we think the reward is where the highest, they love when I give them food. When in actuality, it's the work that produces that cue that says, this is coming. And by making it unpredictable, we create more excitement and more dopamine than when it's predictable. And so there's a very awesome video. It's called Jackpot Dopamine by Professor Sapolsky. And it explains an experiment that they did on monkeys. And pulling levers, the button, they pull a lever, they receive a reward. The light that cued the monkeys to work, that is when their dopamine spiked the most, because they're like, yeah, if I do this, I got nothing. I got to do it harder. I got to work a little bit harder to potentially get more. And so by making it very variable, by changing up the reward and making it unpredictable, we can create so much more excitement. If I always click the dog and give them one piece of food, click the dog and give them one piece of food, click the dog and give them one piece of food, we do a little bit the opposite. They already know click means, all right, I get one piece of food. But if we surprise them and give them 30 pieces of food, that in itself is like, whoa, okay, what did I do to get this one? Maybe they came back a little faster. Maybe they called off of a squirrel. Those type of things, I would start to maybe pay them a little bit more, right? In a capitalistic society, we are rewarded, hopefully, by our efforts. If we work harder, we in turn hopefully receive more. If we put more work in, it's not a communistic society where it's like no matter how hard you work, you get the same as that person. That doesn't create very excited workers, and it doesn't create very excited dogs. Now, there is a time and place where I do believe we need to make things a little bit less exciting, right? Because when we talk about motivation or excitement in young dogs, guess what that does? It ruins our stability. Excitement is the exact opposite of now be calm. So it's a double-edged sword, and it's a balance. And so when we're working with our dogs, we need to find that balance. I want my dog to enjoy training, but I also need to teach him you also have to stay there. And so when we talk about different reward systems for things where I'm trying to create stability, I don't want to use a lot of unpredictable rewards, but to create excitement, I do. So for something like the come when call command, I definitely use more of an unpredictable reward system because I want my dog to be like, maybe he'll whoop out a ball this time. I don't know. I better go check. And in doing so, it's not only calling my dog to grab them to put the leash on, because that is what's most common. Most of the time when we're calling our dogs is because they're doing something bad. They're doing something we don't like. And so we call them to say, hey, get over here. I'm going to put the leash back on you now. And you better believe our dogs will figure that out fairly quickly. So we don't just want them to come to say, okay, now I'm taking away your freedom, right? We're punishing them. And they are very smart, so they will come and then avoid you again. And then go do what they're doing anyways. But by using an unpredictable reward system for something like the come when called command, we have a better way to create more motivation in wanting to come back to us. Again, it's the why. Why does our want to come back? With stuff like our sit, with stuff like our down. As much as I want my dog to be excited doing it, I don't need them to be like sitting and like shaking like, oh my God, we're gonna have so much. No, I want to create more stability in my sit, in my down, in my place command, and maybe even in my heel command. For competition obedience, I do want more motivation, so I will at times use more of an unpredictable reward system. But for sit, down, place, I don't need them to be so excited, because again, when we have too much motivation, we don't have stability. And that can be a problem if we want to work on a down stay for 5 minutes, a play stay with company. We want to change how we're rewarding our dogs to match what we're looking for. When my dog gets on a place, I'm not like, woo, you're doing great, because what's most likely going to happen in the beginning? They're going to jump off. Too much excitement, too much motivation is going to ruin stability, which is stability is kind of like our stay.
Yeah, and that's great. And I love that you talk about mixing in different types of rewards. It's actually not something that I've thought of using before for the come when called, but I can definitely see how that will add more motivation to the exercise. I think it's something I'm going to start incorporating because, of course, anytime we're trying to get reliability from something, it's a matter of are we able to control the motivating factors that, in a sense, dictate what our dogs are going to do. Traditionally, or usually what I would do is I would have my kibble that I'm using just for all the other basic obedience commands, and then I would use freeze-dried dog food for the come when called because that's more valuable. But I'm definitely going to incorporate adding a few different things into it because I can see how that can add more excitement to the command, which of course is so important. Now, you mentioned some of the other ones. Those are important for these 5 commands that everybody should be teaching their dogs. Can we go into some of those other ones a little bit, or did you have anything else you wanted to add with the come when called?
Yeah, no, I think the example that I think we as dog trainers know and we speak of is kind of like the gambler, right? When we talk about a gambler, he's got a little bit of an addiction problem, right? He goes to the casino and he plays the slot machines, but he never knows how much he's going to win. But it's the same action that causes that same excitement, and maybe he wins nothing and then he's like, it's the same action with the unpredictable reward. Sometimes he gets nothing, other times he hits the jackpot. And that's what creates that addiction. And I do want my dog to be addicted to a command like come. I want my dog to come whenever I call him. It's a very important command. Dogs running in the street, dogs running after another dog, dogs running after people. It is never a fun thing to have to chase your dog. And so creating a dog that is very addicted to coming when called is not a bad thing. I want my dog to be like, heck yeah, I want to come, and so but that example of the gambler, it's the same cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. It's not a different one cueing the gambler to what he's going to win. It's the same sound. And yet he keeps coming back because he never knows how much he's going to get. But going into some of the other commands, we have to understand that any of the commands that we use with our dogs, that is the language that we are teaching them. Whether you say sit or you use a different language like Assi or Sitz, German, we're building an understanding and a response. We're conditioning our dogs to do a particular behavior with these commands. And it's very important. One of the most common things I see people do with their dogs, say sit. They didn't sit. Hey, put your butt down. Hey, come on, all the elbows down. That right there is being inconsistent with what we're looking for them to do. Sit means put your butt down on the ground. So if I say sit and they didn't do it, I'm going to say sit again. I'm not going to then change up the language and try German or Spanish if I've never taught them that. So the commands that we use with our dogs are a primary way of communication with my dog. If I want my dog to chillax and not be so crazy, because as you know, you got a Malinois shirt on. Malinois don't really have a chill button. They're not really chill dogs. So I use the down command. Instead of saying, hey, stop moving around. What are you doing? I just say down. Down is a very important command, especially when we talk about duration. So I use down and I teach down as a command to say, we're just going to hang out here for a bit. Whether it be at a coffee shop, whether it be in my living room. Down is one of those ones that I love because it helps to create a little bit of that off switch. Down is the position that they rest in. Down is the position that they sleep in, right? Where the body goes, the mind hopefully follows. Not always with these Malinois, right? But another command is sit. Sit, I think, is a very important one, but I use this for brief moments in time. I don't really practice a 10-minute sit stay. I would just use it down. But if I need my dog to sit there while I say, hey, yo, how's it going? Nice to meet you. I will have them go into a sit and then go on my merry way. Or if I'm coming to a crosswalk, I don't want my dog to down and get comfortable and be like, all right, come on. We got 10 seconds now. Get up and let's cross the street. And so at specific moments, I do like to use the sit command to create some stability. We're just going to sit here for a second. And then we carry on, whether it's to greet somebody, whether it's at a stop sign or crosswalk. So sit is another valuable one. I do also think heel. We need to teach our dogs to heel and walk with us, not walk us or us walk them, dragging them behind us, right? So this is a very important command, and I usually go in teaching the heel command with the mindset of it's a game of follow me. I don't like to say, hey, just heel, stay on this side. I don't hold my dog. I don't restrain my dog. I don't tighten up the leash to where they can't leave my side. I let them make a choice, but I also make it engaging. I teach it as a game of follow me. Because when we go into places where it's a little crowded, I love taking my dogs out to outdoor malls or place hikes and stuff like that. But in crowded places, I need to make sure that my dog's not at the end of a 6-foot leash taking out people that are walking by us, right? So I want my dog to be nice and close to me and kind of follow me, right? One of the things that I see with this heel command is we don't spend a lot of time focusing on teaching them to want to be with us. And instead we're on our phone looking and walking as our dog is walking, pulling, and we're just like, yeah, you go do your thing. And then 2 years later, we have a little bit of a problem. So with the heel, make it a game. I love to make it a game of follow me. We have to think that our dogs are constantly learning. If they're pulling and they find something disgusting to eat, they will eat it, and they will learn something that by pulling, it gets them to all the disgusting things. So heel is another really important command that I like to have in my tool bag. Place is a fantastic one. Place, teaching our dogs to go to a specific area and just hang out there. It's very similar to a down, right? But maybe it's a little bit more comfortable because, I do teach my dogs to place on dog beds. So I just say, go chill on your bed. I'll leave the room, come back, and my dog's on her back with her feet up in the air. She's very comfortable. But it's also teaching her you do have to stay on there, whether guests come over, whether we're eating dinner, or in particular situations where I just need her to go away for a second while I bring in groceries. If I'm bringing in groceries, I'm not like, hey, get out of my way, move, what are you doing? I just say place, and my dog will go to her place, hang out, and it creates so much more clarity as far as what I'm looking for from her or him. And he's like, yeah, sure, okay, yeah, I'll go over here. And as soon as I'm done with the groceries, you can get off, and then we can do what we're gonna do.
I love the place command. Now, I call it the climb command. I thought you called it the climb command as well.
Oh yeah, man, I've changed my ways. I'm a placer now.
Because I was like, what's a good command for the bowl where we have the dog put their front paws on the bowl and then we can teach them to pivot their back end. I was like, you know what, I'll call that place. I'll stick with climb. But regardless, it doesn't matter what we call it, as you said earlier, as long as we're consistent with the command. And climb, as you said, or place, there's all kinds of different applications for that where it could be valuable. And I was thinking as you were talking about heel or loose leash walking, some people may think that they don't really need that command because they don't take their dog on walks. They just keep the dog inside the house and in the backyard, and the dog's really not getting much of that exposure out in the environment. And, that's fine if some people have those house dogs, but where does everybody need to take their dogs? To the veterinarian clinic at some point. So even if the dog doesn't go out on daily walks, teaching that, especially in the beginning, so you have it ready to use whenever you need to go somewhere, or if they have to take the dog to a boarding place because they're going to be going on vacation or something like that. It can definitely come into play regardless of who you are. And the place command or climb command, yeah, I love using that for all kinds of different things. Getting the dog geared up to go on a walk, having them go to their place while you're eating dinner, whatever it is that you're doing. And that's something that I want to talk about as well that I think is very important, is telling our dogs what we want them to do in any given situation. And you basically were hitting on that. I don't want to be having to walk by and tell my dogs, get out of my way while I'm carrying groceries. I just say, go to the place. So now in that situation, you're teaching your dog, hey, when I'm coming in carrying groceries, go sit over there and just chill out for a little bit. How can doing these things teaching our dogs what to do in certain situations that the dog is going to be presented in have an effect on their overall well-being. Like making them more confident, making them more comfortable in their environment. Can you hit on that a little bit as well? Because I want people to understand the importance, not just being able to control our dogs, but rather putting our dogs in a good mental state and well-being.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. These commands ultimately help our dogs to understand where they fit in our pack. Because typically, if we don't have these commands or ways of communicating with them, one of the more common things I see is anxiety. The dogs don't know what to do with themselves, and they find things to do that are self-rewarding or self-soothing, barking, digging, chewing, because they have this I need to do something, and if we don't help to direct that energy to something productive or something positive, the more commonly what you see is a dog that has anxiety. So it helps our dogs to not have to think so much about, I don't know what to do with myself, I'm a little bit antsy, right? We can give our dog something. And with doing that, it's very similar to classical conditioning. Just for example, that example of coming in with the groceries. After being very consistent when every time I come in with groceries and tell my dog to place, come in with the groceries, tell my dog to place, come in with the groceries, my dog's gonna be like, hey, you don't have to tell me, I'm gonna go to the place. That is the goal. And so by being clear with the commands that we're teaching, by having them do what we would like them to do, right? Because it's not a problem until it's a problem, you know? And then, so we need to kind of find alternative solutions. And these commands typically are going to be better solutions than having them do what they're already doing. Going in between your legs with groceries, jumping at the door. You know, this is a very important one. When somebody knocks, I'm always telling my dog, place or climb. But I give them that command so then they hear the door and they're like, oh, I'm going to go place myself. And that helps to have harmony in my house. I'm not fighting my dog to get to the door. Classical conditioning does take some time to kick in, but that's ultimately what we're doing. Pavlov already did all the research for us. We just have to be consistent in what we would like our dogs to do. When we're inconsistent, we create an environment where it's not clear what's expected of them, and anxiety can happen. It can be a confidence issue. There's a lot of things that can happen. But when our dogs understand their place in the pack and what they need to do, you have harmony so much faster.
You said exactly what I wanted you to say, because it is important. You know, we think about, often people are told when they're working with their dogs that they need to be the confident leader. Well, here's the problem. You can't be confident if you don't know what to do. You know, you can tell someone all day, be confident, be confident. But if they don't know what to do in different situations, that anxiety or fear or whatever you want to call it is going to come to the surface. And it's the same thing with our dogs. If our dog knows when our owner's in the kitchen, I go here, boom, their confidence goes up. If they know what to do when they're out on a walk, their confidence goes up. And as a side effect, which you hit on beautifully, is it drops that anxiety level. I mean, again, we just have to even look at it from our own perspective as humans. Anytime I'm going into a situation and I don't know what to do, I'm more nervous, I'm more anxious about that situation. I may try to act cool, calm, and collective, but inside I'm going through a bunch of stress, which our dogs can experience the same way. So going through teaching these 5 commands, sit down, come, heel, and what was the other one? Sit down, come, heel, and place was the other one. Now, something that we did not say out of the 5, which some people are going to be asking about, is, well, isn't the stay, wouldn't that be in the top 5? Explain why it's not in the top 5, because really it actually is.
Yes, of course. There are many times where I need my dog to stay right where he's at, right? I don't in particular use the word stay, but I do teach an implied stay. So again, with some of these commands, sit, down, place, I would like for them to do it and keep doing it until we release them. Right? That clicker that I said that I like to teach my dogs a recall from is also my release. I could also say a word like free. I can also say a word like break. Those can also be, it's kind of tomato, right? By teaching an implied stay, we eliminate the use of the word stay. So when I tell my dog to sit, I would like him to sit there, and I will keep rewarding him while he's in the sit. Sit, I take a step back and I'll go back and feed him. Sit, I'll take 2 steps back and I go and feed him. And then when I release him, whether it's with free, whether it's with a click, he can then get up and I can give him more food, I can give him pets. Depending on what we're working at and where we're at in our training program, we can reward with various items. And so the stay is very important, but I do teach an implied stay. So when I say sit, it is also included that they must stay there until I release you, until I say free. Then you can get up and get this piece of food. When I say down, I would like you to stay in that down until I tell you free or until I release you. The word is not the most important, but the act of them staying there. And so I like to think of it as this, and this is a really good way that I heard of it, or heard it put. How about that? So to teach the stay, I like to think of it as room service. When the dog is in a position that I want to teach to stay, I'm going to be bringing them food because I'm room servicing them, right? If we go to a hotel and they have room service, we may never want to leave our room. Right? Like, oh, I'm just going to order all the food to us. I'm going to be in this big old bed watching movies all day. I would love for that. And I probably need one of those type of things soon here. But room service can help to make them want to stay there. So the way that I would teach an implied sit is by sitting and taking them a piece of food. Stepping back, taking them a piece of food. I will bring the food to you so that you want to stay there. And we create value in staying there. When I release, I can give a food sometimes, I can pet sometimes. If I'm trying to create stability, I don't want the release to have too much excitement, because then they're like, come on, tell me to get up so we can play this big game. So it's a balance. Where you're at in your training program, if you have a young puppy, if you just adopted a dog, it will change. But the same principles remain. Sit, we're implying to stay. Down is implied to stay there. Place is implied to stay there. Heel is implied to stay there. Because we don't want our dogs to learn. They put their butt down, they can, they get a piece of food and they get back up, and we have to then wrangle them up and try it again. So it's very important to also, another important thing to teach your dog is a release marker. Free, a clicker, break. Something that tells our dog, you can get up now. Yeah, good job. You did good. You're released. Good boy. It's very important to have that in place as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always tell people if you're going to release a dog, 3 main ways of doing it: giving them a new command, using the terminal marker, or using a release word. And those will get the dog released from that position. So when we're looking at it, those 5 most important commands was a sit, down, come, heel, place, and being able to do a stay in each one of those. I have 2 final questions for this interview. The second one is, what would be some honorable mentions? Because bare minimum, somebody can navigate throughout an entire dog's life using those 5 commands, including the stay within each one of those commands where it applies. What would be some honorable mentions that could add additional value, control, and clarity to people who want to do a little bit more than the 5 necessary ones?
For sure. So, some honorable mentions. We have to think of a drop it or an out command. That is by far one of the things that we leave out. And in turn, we can create problems when it comes to toys, when it comes to shoes, when it comes to things that our dogs want to put in their mouth. Sometimes we need to take it out of their mouth. So teaching them a drop it or an out command. And again, I like to start this with food. I like to say, I'll trade you for this. You have a ball in your mouth, I have this other ball in my mouth. We can switch, we can trade. You drop that one, I'll mark it and throw the other one. And so teaching an out, especially for our higher drive dogs. Some dogs may not have, well, I was going to use my pug as an example, but he has a very high prey drive. It's pretty funny. But some dogs may not have an intense prey drive. And so we may not have to worry too much about it. But if we have a dog that loves to play fetch, it's important that we teach an out command. It's important that we also potentially teach a quiet command. Some of our dogs, maybe by genetics, are going to be a little bit more vocal than other dogs. So teaching them something like a quiet command. Teaching them to be quiet on cue can be very helpful in situations where you're in an apartment and your dog's barking and your neighbors are complaining. That's never fun. It adds a bunch of stress and unnecessary stress that can cause other problems in the long run. So teaching a quiet command. And a lot of times it sounds super counterintuitive, but if you can teach your dog to bark on command, we can teach them to be quiet on command. Right? We're teaching a behavior and the opposite behavior. So I think that's a very important thing to kind of keep in mind.
Yes, with the leave it, that's incredibly important. Leave it or drop it, and that really comes down to safety. Because of course, if somebody's out on a walk, their dog goes to pick up something that could be potentially harmful, telling them to drop it or leave it could potentially save the dog's life, or at least prevent them from getting really sick. And then I agree too, the quiet command is very important, because if we're inside, as you said, an apartment, we have a condo, we want to be courteous to those that are there living in the environment with us, just being part of the community. So these are going to be some things that people should be teaching their dogs. Now, the last question that I have is, of course, we can get our dogs to do these behaviors by using incentives, whether it's affection, toys, rewards. How are we going to get to a point where it's reliable, regardless of what's going on in the environment? And the one I want to direct this specifically to is the come when called, because as you said, that's something that's incredibly important. It's for the safety and well-being of the dog. If the dog sees a squirrel across the street, takes off after that squirrel, the leash flies out of the owner's hands, how are we going to guarantee to get that dog to turn around and come back if its number one favorite thing in the world is the squirrel? What can we do to ensure the reliability?
For sure, Nate. What we have to think of is all of these commands are helping to enrich our dogs' lives. The more we do with them, and these are just some commands I start off with. I love also teaching my dogs tricks. I love also teaching my dogs behaviors that have nothing to do with maybe the competition I'm looking to compete in, because it just provides enrichment and more outlets for their energy. We have to understand that a lot of behavioral issues come because of lack. A lot of the behavioral issues come because our dogs have an excessive amount of energy that they need to release. They find behaviors, like we had just mentioned, barking, as a way to release some of that pent-up energy. And barking is self-rewarding. It helps them to feel better because all of that energy now they're expending, but it comes at a cost. Getting evicted, causing high stress around the house, chewing on floorboards, chewing up doors, all of that stuff comes because our dogs have an excessive amount of energy. So these commands help to build a strong foundation to then build off of. Because the more you do with your dog, the better life you guys will have together, the better life your dog will also have. So I like to think of doing these commands, but I also like to get them exercise, whether it's playing a game of fetch or teaching them something like a treadmill. Those type of things where we can help to expend a little bit of that energy so that we can create even more harmony and provide our dogs with what they need. So to then answer your question, it very much so depends on the training program that we are going with. Ultimately, just like I said, I do like to start all of this with food. But at some point, our dogs are going to be full. They're going to say, you know what, I can't take any more. That's a very good reason for them to want to ignore me when I click them, ignore me when I call them, because they've already had their fill for the day. They're like, dude, I'll get food tomorrow. It's all good. So to help build on top of that positive, I like to add in some forms of negative reinforcement. And the way that I like to start is with a leash, but then ultimately to get, in my opinion, the most reliability, something like a remote training collar, an e-collar, a remote collar, that tool in particular will allow me to give my dogs the most freedom and have a way of communicating to them. Most collars go about a half mile. So from a half mile to come to me. So these remote collars can help when taught correctly. That's a whole other YouTube Nathan Schomer video. When taught correctly to respond to it, we can give our dogs more freedom, because now I can say, come, and I can give a little tap on the neck, and it means, okay, I'm coming back to you. Whether it means excitement's coming because we've taught it to mean to come back to you. That remote collar will help to build and utilize more quadrants in the quadrants of learning, in the theory of learning, that will just help to ensure our dogs to come back to us. So teaching some form of negative reinforcement. And the e-collar, the remote collar, is one that we can use from distances. So it allows me to remove the leash and feel safe, because at a certain point, there are 1,000 pictures that I can show my dog. I can show my dog skateboarders. I can show my dogs people on bikes. I can show my dogs other dogs, excited dogs, fearful dogs. But there are just some things that I haven't encountered. There are still 10,000 other pictures that I haven't trained them on how to respond. So that remote collar is going to be a little bit easier to generalize all of these commands in this little tiny feeling when we can teach it correctly. Because in the event I run across a moose, a snake, something that my dogs have never seen before, I can then fall back on a tool like the remote collar if they don't respond because they're not hungry. So to get the most reliability, in my opinion, using something like a remote collar is key, but introducing and knowing how to utilize that remote collar is very important also.
I could not agree more with that. Come when called, very important command, but if it's not reliable, then it's completely worthless. And the remote training collar, in my opinion, obviously as well as yours, is going to help get that reliability regardless of what circumstances or situation the dog may be placed in. And in the end, really, if you think about it, it's for safety. It's for the well-being of our dogs. It's to give them freedom. Something we talked about before, when I'm getting ready to go to a private lesson and I'm taking my remote collar with for the lesson, I have to hide it from my dogs, because if they see it, they get really excited because they think I'm getting ready to take them out on a hike, or I'm taking them to the beach, or I'm taking them to the local park to play fetch. It means something fun, but it also gives us that safety, that control, and that reliability that everybody wants. So one of the things that I want to do is put all your contact information in the description of this video so people can reach out to you if they have questions or if they want to work with you directly. Where are you guys located again?
We are located in Greeley, Colorado. So we are in northern Colorado. We service the Denver area. We have clients down in the Springs. We meet people out in public. We do lessons. We do protection training. I do PSA. So I am a decoy. I help dogs get prepared for some of the protection scenarios. I do obedience training. Our company is called Synergetic Canine Solutions. So you can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Facebook, Synergetic Canine Solutions. Our email is synergeticcaninesolutions@gmail.com. So pretty easy, just got to spell it all out. And so it's all one word. But yep, you can find us there. We are also, I am a fan. Not all e-collars are made equal. I also am a rep, and I do sell a particular brand of e-collar that I do believe in and that I back 100%. They're Martin system collars, and they're their Chameleon remote training collars. Very low profile. It has contact measurements so you can see if it's making connection with your dog. It's waterproof. It's a really top-notch collar.
That's awesome. I want to get one of those collars too, because I haven't used it before, but I've heard nothing but good things about that brand. And what you said, being able to see that the correction's going through, which is very important when we're first introducing our dogs to the collar. So Thank you so much for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. And as you mentioned, you offer pet training, you offer protection training if somebody needs it, training for competition obedience, pretty much anything somebody needs if they're in your area. And of course, I would highly recommend you to anybody who wants to take their training to the next level. So thanks again for being on the show. Truly appreciate it.
Thanks again, Nate. It's always great talking to you. I think my muscles are getting a little bit bigger than yours, so you got to step it up in the gym, man.
Absolutely, I most certainly will. Thanks again.